Okay, we are on a quest. We are on a quest to hopefully not have to do the podcast anymore.
We're on a quest for riches.
Quest for riches,
This is truly like the road to El Dorado.
Yeah, actually that's more similar to the topic today than you might think. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. Where are we going, Chris?
We're just going to a liquor store. Welcome to Culture Just Weird.
You're welcoming.
Well, actually, wait, hold on.
You're welcoming me to Culture Just Weird?
Well, I'm welcoming everyone to Culture Just Weird.
Okay.
Before we get started, though, hold on. There's just something I forgot to do here. I'm gonna do it live on the show, just while people are listening.
What are you doing?
So I have this scratcher ticket, and I'm scratching off these scratchies on the show. Let's see. Can you guys hear this? Scratching it.
You're scratching away.
Scratching the scratchies. Yeah, I have a California Lottery scratcher ticket.
What does this have to do with the show?
Ooh, $99.
Wait, really?
No, I'm not. No, because I didn't get the winning number. I'm sorry. So I'm playing this scratcher called Cloud 9. I just want to do it live on the show because, like, if we win, then I'm just gonna like drop the microphone and just like run out of the room, and we're gonna stop doing the podcast. Like, if I win like $1 million, like, fuck this, right?
You wouldn't keep doing the podcast if you won the lottery?
I wouldn't keep doing any. Actually, if I won $1 million, I would still need to like have a day job and everything these days.
Yeah, this isn't the world of blank check any longer. And blank check, he only wrote the blank check for $1 million and somehow managed to buy a mansion and a girlfriend and probably like an ice cream bar, like a bar of ice cream, not like a single ice cream bar.
Like there's a place
like a
in
buffet.
My house that serves ice cream. Okay. So I'm not. So far, I haven't won anything. That'll come as a shock to you if you've played the scratchers before. Yeah, so what I have this one where you have to like match winning numbers, and it's just not working. Yeah, none of my numbers match. And even more shocking is that there's like some really like big prize money here, but like the winning numbers don't match. So there's like a $20,000 prize, but my winning number for that doesn't match. So.
And you spent $10 on this?
This is a $10 one, by the way. So like this is like a high value ticket.
And you got nothing.
And I got jack shit. I have one more to scratch. Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. We have to still do the podcast for a living.
Okay. That's extremely disappointing that you didn't win anything. It is not extremely disappointing that we get to keep doing the podcast, but I'm really sad that you didn't win a scratcher.
Is that? I wonder if we're gonna like lose fans now. They're gonna be like, "Oh man, that was like really like that was a downer. I'm not listening to this shit anymore." All right. Well, the scratcher, yeah, that was fun. Anyway, you should probably get to the show, right?
Yeah. Who are you?
Okay, so I'm Chris. I am a game designer, data scientist, podcaster.
I'm Kayla. I'm a television writer currently on strike. Fuck the AMPTP. Go
yep.
WGA and SAG.
Hell yeah. Solidarity. And this is Culture Just Weird. Welcome.
Thanks.
Do you have any business? Because I got business out the wazoo.
I have no business, so I will sit back, relax while you business us.
I have lots. I have like just a stack of businesses that I have to get to.
You're in everybody's business?
I have a business client. The business client needs the numbers. So the first and foremost, we got to do our Patreon shout-outs. So we have 2 new patrons between last episode and this episode, and that would be one Nicole Carter and one Niklas Brock. Thank you guys so much for supporting us, for becoming cultists on our Patreon. It really means the world to us that you think that we're worth supporting. So thank you so much.
I love our Patreon patrons so much. I'm not going to lie.
Speaking of Patreon, well, actually, I'll get to that. I have some soapbox issues, but I just don't have time to get into them today. Like, I think I'm going to have to, like, put my soapbox, like, here's what I'm thinking about this. I'm just going to have to save them for the next episode.
We could also do a bonus episode.
Oh, we could do
of just Chris's soapbox.
The soapbox, the box of soap.
Oh, God.
Episode bonus. No, but so the problem is I have, like I said, a lot of business here in the business section. We got to talk about Discord, Kayla.
Discord? Why do we have to talk about Discord, Chris?
Yeah, Discord. It's not today's topic, although it probably could be a topic someday. No, this is about the Cult or Just Weird official Discord going live as of. Oh yeah, you want to say woo? You want to woo? Yeah. Wow, that's so. You sound really excited.
I don't want to scream and blow everybody's eardrums out.
Well, it's going live as of right now. Right now, while I'm speaking the words, not when you guys are listening to the words. By then it will have already gone live. So if you're listening to this, it's live. You should check it out. Kayla, now is when you do your reaction roll thingy where you like feign ignorance and you ask me what Discord is.
Chris, what the hell's a Discord?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked that totally unexpected question. Discord is an online chat and voice hangout place, but like on steroids. So people mostly use it as like a fun chat room, but it's also a place where you can send friends direct messages, kind of like texting. You can make your own chat servers to hang out with said friends or to make new friends. You can use voice channels to chat with your mouth instead of your fingers, and so on. But one of the most popular ways to hang out on Discord is in a community server, which is it's just a place where a bunch of those chat functions I just mentioned are all sort of pulled together around some specific community under the banner of some community. There are a wide range of community servers you can join on Discord, like a ton. There's like anime fan communities, YouTube channel communities, art communities, software development. There's learning servers, there's video game servers, and in fact, Discord started as a place for gamer chat, kind of like Ventrilo or TeamSpeak, if you're familiar with either of those.
Oh my God, I haven't heard of Ventrilo that's a name I haven't heard in 84 years.
And there's like just a shit ton more like weird niche, whatever communities there. Like there's like a bunch that are like NFT scams, but anyway. So,
I'm in currently 2 Discord channels for show topics.
Oh, you are?
I'm in the Your World of Text Discord, and I am in the Cicada 3301 Solvers Discord.
You gotta shoot me an invite to both of those.
I tried and I couldn't figure it out.
Okay. I mention podcasts? Some podcasts have Discord servers where fans of the show can hang out, make friends, talk about the show, post funny memes, and more. And drumroll. Now Cult or Just Weird is one of those podcasts. Woo. We have an official Discord server. Woo! Yeah, you're so excited. In fact, remember how I said there are voice channels in Discord?
Yes.
Well, right now, as we speak, we are live broadcasting this very recording in our Discord server.
What?
We let our Patreon patrons in the server as early birds, so like all of our patrons are already in there, even though it's like technically going live like today. So we let all of our patrons in there early, and we scheduled an event for everyone to come listen to this live recording so they can hear all of our fuck-ups and loud motorcycles out the window in real time and all that other shit we got to edit out. They get to hear it live. So if any of this sounds exciting or interesting to you, we would love for you to come stop by the server and hang out and say hello. Kayla, sorry, I need you to feign ignorance and excitement here again real quick and ask me how you join the Cult or Just Weird Discord.
Chris, how would I even go about joining the Cult or Just Weird Discord? I don't know how a Discord works.
You have such good questions. Wow, how do you get these great questions? Thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
All you gotta do, God, I'm so fucking lame. All you gotta do is find an invite and click on it.
And how do I do that?
Easy. We have an invite link set up on all of our social accounts. So just go to one of our socials and click the Discord link. It'll either be like a Discord icon, or it'll be like a word or like a hyperlink or some combination of those. So we have our invite link. It's up on our Linktree, our Twitter account, which, as you probably know, if you listen to the show, is @culturejustweird on Twitter. The link is going to be on our Facebook page.
Ew.
our Instagram page, which if you want to follow us there, it's at Cult or Just Weirdos on Instagram. And of course, our official website, www.cultorjustweird.com. So head on over to one of those places and click the Discord invite link and join the party. And oh yeah, one more thing. Speaking of party, this coming Sunday, September 3rd at 1 p.m. U.S. Pacific time, we're going to do like a Discord launch party. So both yours truly and Kayla over there will be in the Discord to chat with you guys, chat with fans. We'll also have our music producer Ryan there as like a guest celebrity.
Ooh.
We're going to have a little raffle giveaway for some swag. We'll do a trivia game and even a scavenger hunt, which we'll get to that on the day of the party. We'll explain that later. So check out our social media pages, find an invite link to our Discord, and come by and say hello. Okay. Kayla.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that scratcher ticket that we just did at the top of the show?
Please tell me all about it. Why did we do that?
It was just for shits and giggles, and now we're done.
Okay.
This is the
You're just trying to see if we could.
I was just trying to like make us become unemployed.
Ugh, I'm already unemployed.
Oh yeah, I guess we are. Okay, I was trying to see if we could survive our unemployment. No, so I think that one of the things I want to talk about before we kind of get into the topic today, we're talking about state lotteries on Cult or Just Weird. So that actually wasn't the first scratcher that we've done recently. So
am I supposed to pretend like I?
No, now you don't.
Okay,
no,
I can stop pretending.
Now you can stop pretending because we did scratchers.
We've done so many scratchers. I could really see myself get into scratchers.
You can?
Oh my god!
This is what I wanted to talk about right now.
I hate them, but I could see it.
Okay, first let me explain the difference because we also did numbers games. So we did we did a bunch of scratcher tickets. And we also did numbers games. So numbers games are like Powerball. That's like the thing, like when there's like a bajillion. Like in California, there was recently like a
$1.5 billion.
$1.5 billion with billion with a B payout. Those are numbers games. So that means that you pick a bunch of numbers, and I think with Powerball it's like 6 numbers, and then if you get them all right, then voila, you get the jackpot, the prize, or you split it with other people who also had their numbers called. With scratchers, it's just like there's little games where it's like you scratch off the little thingy on the front of the card, and if you match the numbers or you uncover a $sign bag jackpot, whatever, then you get some money.
Okay.
So it's they're both gambling. It's just different types of gambling. It does get kind of complicated though. Do you remember like when we were trying to figure out like what?
Yeah, you kept giving me the more complicated ones, and I have to sit there for. I had to do one where it was like a crossword puzzle.
Oh, well, so, okay, there's multiple layers of complexity here. So there's the scratchers themselves are like insane. Yeah, they're like, yours was a crossword puzzle. There was one that was like a word find. Like they all have these like weird different rules that kind of like, I don't know, try to make you feel like you're
doing something,
I guess. But then do you remember like the ecosystem of numbers games too? Because like I thought it was just like, oh, there's Powerball.
There was Powerball. There was Super Power. There's
Mega Millions.
Super Mega. There was Mega Millions. It was like 17 different things.
There's Fantasy 5. There's like a Pick 3 or something. And then there's like another 1 or 2 that I am currently forgetting. And that's just California. So it's like, I was like, and I was asking the guys when I was buying the lottery ticket, I was asking the vendors, like, so what is the difference between these things? And they were basically like, like they were just like, oh, that one is you pick the numbers and then you can win, and that one is
you pick the numbers and
you can win. So like that wasn't super helpful. I still feel a little bit overwhelmed by all of the different things you can do, but complicatedness aside, I want to talk just for a minute, like how did it feel playing those different games, those different lottery games?
Which part? Because there's a lot. There's a lot that went into this because we went and got the things and then we came home and played the things.
Yeah.
And
so let's talk about scratchers first. How did those feel?
Playing the game or going and buying?
The whole experience, I guess. Either. Both.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we're talking about the lottery right now. This is the topic for the day.
I'm just asking you a question.
I need to know how much context to give. So when I was a child...
There you go. Perfect. Go all the way back. Back in the 1400s. Don't worry. We do that later.
When I was a child, my dad played the lottery.
Okay.
He particularly played the numbers games.
Okay, so you did like the Powerball thing.
He did like the Powerball thing. And I would often go with him to purchase the numbers because it's like he would, he's picking me up from school and then we'd stop by the liquor store on the way home and he'd get his numbers and then we'd go home.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I have that context around any sort of like lottery or going to the liquor store to buy something. It's like, I don't know if you noticed, but every time we went to buy these lottery tickets, I walked away from you.
Yeah, but I figured that was just part of your like baseline normal I'm anxious all the time.
It just puts you back in the headspace of like dad's buying the tickets and you have to wander around and see if there's anything interesting to look at while you're here. It's just an uncomfortable experience for that reason.
Oh,
yeah.
Porno magazine.
Actually doing the scratchers. So this isn't the first time I've done scratchers.
Okay.
I have a family friend who oftentimes in like birthday and Christmas gifts will throw a scratcher in there for you. And that's always fun because you get a little like, ooh, you didn't have to buy it.
Okay, actually, sorry. No, can I interrupt you here?
Yes.
Those are not fun. I don't like getting scratchers as gifts or giving scratchers as gifts.
Because what if you win $1 million?
Yeah, it's like the quote unquote worst case scenario is like you lose, you don't get anything. That's bad. But then like the best case scenario also kind of feels bad because then it's like, yeah, what if you win $1 million? And it's like you kind of feel like you have to.
You got to give them some money.
Give them some.
Yeah.
And then like they also probably feel bad about, they're like, oh man, if I just hung on to that, I could be a millionaire. I don't know. It just.
Well, I'm just giving you my context of. Those are fun for me because it's like, ooh, small buy-in. Doing the scratchers this time around, stakes are a lot higher.
Because we spent our own money on it.
Because we spent our own money. We bought them. We went and did it. So stakes were a lot higher.
We spent the podcast's money on it.
Sure.
Which is not, that's our money.
We are the podcast.
Right. But we can expense it.
But man, oh man, did I want to win every single time. Every single time I was like, I really want this to be the number. I really want this to be the number.
Yeah.
I really want this to be the number. And then, good Lord, is it deflating when you don't win.
Yeah, I know.
Like
that's like
empty.
my main takeaway.
I felt empty and sad and bad and just like kind of like any analogy I'm coming up with I can't say on the podcast.
Yes, you can. No, because we can edit it out. Don't censor yourself just because we're live, Kayla.
That's like not coming.
Yeah.
It's like when that gets ruined.
It's lottery blue balls.
It's lottery blue balls. Thank you. That's a better way of putting it.
That's a totally fine thing to say in public.
It was like lottery blue balls, or it was like if you eat like Jack in the Box and you're just like, I guess I'm
Wow, those
full,
metaphors are.
But I'm not satisfied.
So when you go to Jack in the Box, you're like, oh man, I wish I had come.
Yeah, don't you? I mean, that's why the Jack in the Box made everybody sick back in the day.
I really hope not.
That's not why. But it's a similar experience. It's a similar experience of you're just left unsatisfied, and I can see how that can lead to, okay, I have to do that again, or I have to do something more, or I have to try again. Because you're unsatisfied, and so your brain wants you to seek out satisfaction. It's like when you are playing World of Warcraft and
satisfaction.
Get out of here. It's like when you're playing World of Warcraft and you know that like the bugbears, one of them's going to drop a rare item, and you keep killing bugbears, and they keep not dropping the rare item, but you know one of them will, so you keep killing the bugbears.
Oh yeah, we could do a whole podcast on how low probability events drive people, and actually maybe this is that podcast.
Is this that podcast?
I don't know. We will probably get to that a little bit later. But I agree with you about like the deflating thing. I think my like follow up from that is maybe different. Like it doesn't compel me to want to do it again. I think the things that compel me to want to do it again, like to where I kind of get stuck in that loop, is when I win a small amount, like a sort of an inconsequential amount. Like free ticket or like $3. Like I'm probably just going to convert that $3 back into another ticket. Especially if I'm like doing it right there, I'll just be like, oh, give me another ticket.
Right.
Because you're not doing it to get $3. Nobody's playing it to get $3.
No, I don't want $3.
You're playing it to get the $1 million prize or whatever. So I think that's where it gets me. But like, yeah, I felt super deflated too. It was a very, very binary sort of situation where like, when the tickets were sitting on the countertop, they were like just full of potential. They were pregnant with potential.
Right.
Right. And then you do the scratcher, and then it just feels like just a fucking piece of trash.
There's
it's just trash
there
in your hand. and the same thing with like, it's almost worse with the numbers games because we had to like wait a few days to check if our numbers won. Like there's an immediacy to the scratchers, but with the numbers, we like waited several days, checked the numbers, and then it was like, it takes you like 2 seconds to check.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, all right, let's see, 3, 72, 45, like, oh, okay, I already didn't win.
Yeah.
Wow, that's disappointing.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't get my $200 million.
But what if you got like?
Yeah, but that's like nobody.
Yeah.
It's so small.
I know.
Anyway, I just want to talk a little bit about how it felt playing the different games, just to kind of stir the pot, just to prime the.
I really want to
pump.
win the lottery. Like, it would feel so good.
Did I addict you to gambling?
I want to win the lottery. It would feel really nice.
I think everyone wants to win the lottery. I think it would feel nice for most people.
Like, I know that. Okay, I know we're probably going to talk about it.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
But it would not fuck me up. I'd be so happy and healthy with $1 billion.
Yeah, I actually don't. Well, we might get to that, but like I'll just in case we don't, I'll say here up at the top that like the idea that lottery winners tend to like bad things happen to them and their life goes to shit is actually a total myth.
It's a myth. It's a myth. It's big lotto trying to, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's big something.
No, it's more of like it comes down to something that we will talk about, which is like this idea of deservingness. It's a lot of it is like very psychological and like very rooted in like cultural norms and traditions about like who is deserving of like wealth and success and reward. And so it comes down to that. But I don't want to jump the gun too much. And like, what the heck? Why are we even talking about state-run lotteries on this podcast about cults or just weirds? Well, rather than talk more about this with you, Kayla, actually, I was able to snag an expert that I chatted with about this very topic. And actually, I do have to kind of come clean here. This expert and his book were actually why I wanted to do state lotteries on Cult or Just Weird in the first place. His name's Dr. Jonathan Cohen, and he wrote a book called For $1 and a Dream, State Lotteries in Modern America. I actually heard a conversation he had on the 99% Invisible podcast, and, well, let's just say it piqued my interest. All right, so can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, I have a PhD in history from the University of Virginia, which formed the basis of my book. I don't know how personal you want to get, I guess, to keep it sort of lottery related or lottery-esque. I sort of grew up playing board games, which I think sparked my interest in the lottery world.
Yeah. Well, that'll just be the interview because I love board games too.
Yeah. Yeah, so we should just talk about. We don't even need to talk about lotteries. We can just talk about Ideal Scythe opening strategies.
Oh man, what's your recent like really crunchy board game that you've played?
So I've been playing a lot of Wingspan online. I say that with some embarrassment because it's like it's not a very heavy game. I don't know if like serious gamers are into Wingspan, but I can play it in like 25-minute spurts when my son is taking a nap or something.
Okay. That's a good session length, yeah.
Right. But I'm trying to get back into Great Western Trail. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think it's trying to do too many things at once, but I'm giving it another try.
Right. Yeah, I have a little group. So I used to work at Blizzard. I have a little group of friends that really like just the really European style, just freaking engine games.
Yeah.
So we just played a game called Barrage. Was the most recent one we tried. It's a game about like building dams and having hydropower in like a post-apocalypse. Exactly. Anyway, see, this is what I meant. Like we would totally like if you allow me to go down the rabbit hole on the board games. So I'm gonna let you get back to your background.
My boring background. Yeah. Just ignore that 35-minute digression. So my lottery interest. I mean, I think sort of to play the sociologist of myself or to psychoanalyze myself, I think was sort of born out of an interest partly in games in general, and then also an interest sort of at my moment of sort of political awakening, so to speak, around the financial crisis and sort of what that at the time was an abiding interest in, I guess what you'd call the American dream, sort of to put it succinctly. And then, I mean, the real answer how I got here was sort of flailing around for a year and a half in graduate school trying to find a dissertation topic. And then it turned out sort of by accident, sort of stumbling into this one. And lo and behold, here I am, 8 years later.
Interesting. So when you say by accident, what do you mean? Do you mean like this was sort of because you had the background in board games? It was something that interested you, or did you have like a graduate advisor that mentioned it or something?
Right. Well, so some folks come to graduate school, bless their hearts, like knowing exactly what it is they want to write basically a book about, right? They already have like a clear vision in their head, and that was not me. In fact, I would think that my advisor jokes that the only thing I wasn't interested in was the one thing that I applied to work on with her, which was racial violence in the early 20th century South. So she also jokes that I would like come to her office every week with like a different dissertation topic and a different idea for something, and these were all worthy ideas. Eventually, I was sort of steering in this direction, and this is actually getting us into the substantive territory. I was steering into this direction about the disconnect in American society between class and culture. That we have people who are sort of coded as, let's say, middle class or upper class, but are making $30,000 and work at a Starbucks, but they're coded as upper class because they have a master's degree in English. And folks who are plumbers who are making $170,000, who are coded as blue collar working class, but in fact are making so much more money. So the all this to say is the example of this, of the best example you can think of, are lottery winners who are going to be disproportionately lower income people who all of a sudden have extreme wealth, but whose sort of cultural behavior, let's say, doesn't match up with their actual wealth. That was going to be an example of this other thing. And then I sort of started digging into the lottery stuff, and speaking of a rabbit hole, I just found myself going deeper and deeper and sort of treating the lottery as the thing in and of itself rather than this example of this whole other phenomenon.
And here we are in the rabbit hole. Now, would you say you won the lottery when it comes to your topic?
Hit the jackpot. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I had to. I just had to.
There'll be many more of those to come, I'm sure. Yeah.
I have a terrible sense of humor, so yes. So I have a vague sense of lotteries today. Like I have a vague sort of notion just based on, I live in California, and like the Powerball just climbed over $1 billion. So that's percolated into everybody's mind. And I also I grew up in Florida during the 80s and 90s. So I kind of remember when some of those big rollover jackpots would start happening. And again, the same sort of thing, like you'd start hearing about it on the evening news. But that's kind of where my knowledge ends. So I'd really like to know more about the origin of state lotteries in the U.S. Like how old are they? Where do they come from? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So the origin, it's funny. Some people think when I start sharing the details, some people say, "Oh, that's a lot more recent than I thought," and some people say, "Oh, that's a lot older than I thought." But the sort of modern state lottery system, as we know and maybe love it today, started in New Hampshire in 1963, 1964. Was the sort of the first lottery pioneer. And I'll just say, lotteries are a very, very old institution, an old idea. There wasn't like someone in New Hampshire named John Lottery in the 1960s who like invented the lottery, right? He's sort of rekindling an old idea from the 19th century, from turn of the millennium, you name it. But New Hampshire sort of takes the lottery plunge in 1964 with this really old, really crazy game that would be unrecognizable to us today. It's like rooted in live horse racing. The tickets cost $3, which is the equivalent of $15 today.
Wait, $3 back then.
Right, $3 back then, exactly.
Wow.
So it's unrecognizable, but it's the first state to take the plunge, and for all sorts of reasons, including the sort of neighboring state phenomenon where lotteries or different laws will spread like a contact virus from one state to a next. Once New Hampshire takes the plunge, they cover the Northeast in the upper Rust Belt from the 1960s to the late 70s. Then they start in the West Coast in the mid 80s. The Midwest in the late 80s, and then in the South in the 90s. And then here we are today with 45 lottery states and now $100 billion in annual lottery sales nationwide.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay. It's interesting when you mention it seems older and also younger. I think when I first, the 1963 sounds right to me, but only because I've read your book now.
Yeah.
You
cheated a little bit. Yeah.
I did cheat a little. Don't tell the listeners. I think when I got into it, that did seem a little, I was like, oh, that does seem recent. But then to your point, it sounds like it's just the latest iteration maybe in a long line of human gambling behaviors. Is that kind of what you're talking about with the long-term part of it?
Yeah, and this is actually a big part of the sort of the modern day politics and the question of, whether lotteries should be regulated is gambling a irreducible human impulse that's irrepressible, and that no matter what, in all times, in all places, in all ways, people have this need to gamble and a desire to gamble, and that if we don't offer the lottery ourselves, will they just find another way to gamble? In some cases, yes, it is part of this sort of long human trajectory of love of gambling. But there's a lot that's happening with the lottery system today that is way exceeding that sort of natural impulse. But yes, I think it's fair, and I do this sort of in the very, very opening pages of my book, to sort of put it on this long trajectory of sort of human gambling that goes back, to the Old Testament or to ancient Chinese dice with different markings on them. It's part of that story, but again, at some point, I think we sort of jump the shark a little bit with the modern iteration of that story.
Yeah, it's interesting how what you were just talking about regarding this, like sanctioning, does sanctioning an activity that we consider some segment of the population considers to be a vice. I definitely personally have a bias towards like, well, you can't stop people from gambling. You can't stop people from drinking. That's why prohibition didn't work. The war on drugs is a bad thing. But I feel like the lottery example is maybe a little bit of like a check on my bias for that. Like it doesn't feel like sanctioning that is necessarily like a clear slam dunk.
Right. I definitely don't think that if we were going to get rid of the lottery, that we should like criminalize lottery tickets in the way that we did with narcotics, right? But it's really important to note the ways that the lottery works differently from something like drugs or alcohol, which is with lotteries, the more people who buy tickets and the more sort of official and the bigger pocketbooks behind the entity that's organizing the lottery, the bigger the prizes can get, which attracts more people, which makes the prizes bigger, and so on. It's not like once more people start doing drugs, the drugs get better quality and cheaper. It's it doesn't have effect on other people if you're doing drugs per se. Maybe it affects the availability, but that's it. But this is the inherent appeal of the lottery is only possible because so many people are participating, and so many people are only able to participate because 7-Eleven has decided to sell tickets in all 45 participating lottery states, and because it's states and these corporations that print the tickets that have sort of lent their imprimatur of legitimacy to make the games possible. So it's irrepressible, but again, like irrepressible human need to gamble wouldn't get us to $100 billion a year. There's something else going on here. Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. The sort of the feedback cycle that you get there, that the bigger it is, the better it is, and the better it is, the bigger it gets.
Which also explains, just to your point at the very top, how these big Powerball and Mega Millions jackpots are happening. Is jackpot gets up, more people are like, let me just buy a couple tickets. They lose, but they're like, all right, I'm already trying to buy tickets. Let me keep going. The big jackpots attract more people who lose, which makes the jackpot get even bigger, which attracts even more people. And then lo and behold, it's at $2 billion, in a matter of a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the way I kind of perceive it is like it doesn't even kind of enter my consciousness until it's hit like a couple rollovers, and then all of a sudden it's this is worth thinking about.
So I actually just thought of this with the most recent iteration, that it's also, I think there's sort of a benchmarking that happens. So, okay, Chris has decided that it's not worth his time or money to buy a lottery ticket until it hits 1.25 billion. Okay, So he buys a lottery ticket, but then he loses, because of course he does, and the lottery gets bigger, and now it goes to 1.35 billion. And Chris, being a logical person, surely says to himself, okay, well, I thought that 1.25 was big enough, and now it's even bigger than 1.25.
Right.
So of course I'm going to buy again. And so even though sort of next time your expectations are going to be a little bit higher, you're sort of incentivized, or you've sort of already subconsciously made the decision that you're going to keep buying tickets as long as the prize, stays at this gargantuan size.
Right, and then that keeps increasing the size of, because there's more Chris's at 1.25 billion, and then there's more Jonathans at 2.2 billion or whatever. Right.
Well, and then and lo and behold, there are 170 million Chris's at $1 billion, because 50% of Americans buy a lottery ticket at least once a year, and many of them are doing so only during these big jackpots. 1 in 8 Americans buy a lottery ticket once a week, but again, there are a lot of people who are only buying a ticket once a year, and that's only when there's some record-setting jackpot that puts the lottery sort of on their antenna for the first time.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, the different segments, and there's definitely more in your book about that. That's really interesting. I did want to ask you though. So this gives me a better sense of why players play the lottery. But in terms of, like, you were talking a little bit about the viral spread of it from state to state, why do states do the lot? Like, what is it on that side that motivates them to initiate lottery?
Yeah. So there's like a hard answer and a soft answer. In terms of the concrete answer is it is very rare for states to find ways to raise money that don't require taxes. It's sort of the simplest answer. And taxes, quote unquote, on gambling, on weed, on sports betting, those are sort of rare opportunities. On cigarettes, those are rare sort of vice taxes, so to speak. So once people decide that culturally they're okay with gambling, it's really hard for a state to justify not getting in on the gambling economy, especially to the example that I mentioned at the top. I live in Connecticut. If Massachusetts has a lottery, or Massachusetts has sports betting, or Massachusetts has legal weed, and everyone from Connecticut is just going across the border to participate in their vice of choice, how can Connecticut justify, not selling these things for itself and keeping the tax money in Connecticut? So that was actually a bigger factor in the first wave of lotteries from 1963 to 1977. There's some other factors that account for the spread afterwards, but that has been a continuous sort of logic that accounts not just for lotteries, but all sorts of political changes across the American landscape over the last 50 years or so.
And then one of the things I found interesting in your book was the parallel between the sort of the magical thinking of lottery players and the magical thinking of state officials about whether the lottery would, bring this sort of, windfall of revenue that we never have to tax people again. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of magical thinking?
Yeah, and this is sort of a real central thesis of the book, which is just to draw out the point that you made, I guess the point that you made that I made, which is that people have this aspersion, this sense that lottery players are poor, irrational, wishful thinkers. And what I found through my research is that lawmakers and voters who enacted lotteries in the first place have these similar irrational, wishful beliefs that a lottery is going to solve their state's financial problems. So, as I said, it is rare for states to have non-tax sources of revenue, but this wasn't a case of politicians getting up there and saying, oh, this is going to be amazing. The lottery is going to raise 1.7% of our annual tax revenue. This was politicians getting up there in the 1960s and saying, and there are quotes to this effect, we'll never have to pay any taxes ever again in the state of New Jersey because we are going to have a lottery. Of course, it was New Jersey. Yeah. But that's really what they were saying. And then when that didn't work in the 80s in California, they sort of reduced the promise a little bit, but kept the silver bullet idea. It wasn't, all right, it's not we're going to never have to pay taxes ever again, but this will single-handedly fund the state education budget. And it's like, okay, all right, that didn't work either. So then in the 90s in the South, in Florida, and well, really in Georgia, and then Florida copies it, it's, okay, it's not going to fund the entire state education budget, but it will fund scholarships for a couple kids to go to college. So no matter what, they can't just be honest that this is going to be a drop in the bucket for government revenue. They need to sort of couch it in these fantastical terms, these wishful terms to convince people to play and to convince people to enact it in the first place. And that, I think, really parallels, to use the word you used, really parallels the beliefs among the lottery players that are convincing them to buy a ticket too.
See, that was one of the things that I wasn't, and I guess you kind of answered my question a little bit. So like when the first wave of state lotteries hit and the illusion wears off that this is going to be a panacea that will eliminate taxes hereafter forever, then it still spreads. So I was going to ask you about that, but it sounds maybe like your answer to that would be it's still just sort of the magical thinking, like the same reason that gamblers keep gambling even though they know the odds, right? Would you say that that's why, or?
Yeah, well, there's definitely some cognitive dissonance going on, or it's like that thing in Arrested Development where it's like, these people delude themselves into thinking it'll work for them, but it might work for us. And it's like, okay, the state, the Illinois, like their lottery didn't solve all their problems, but Indiana's like, you know what? It might just work for Indiana. So they just can't be honest with what the lottery can do or will actually do. For whatever reason, the sort of gambling mentality that makes the games popular has infected the legislators and voters when it comes to gambling as well.
Okay, I want to switch gears then back to players. So you talked about there's kind of like multiple waves of lottery uptake in the U.S. Why did it explode in the 70s? Like, I kind of get why they started doing it in the 60s. You said it was sort of a continuation of some things that already existed, and then state legislators decided that would be free tax. But in terms of players, what was it that really changed in the 70s and 80s that got them going on it?
Right. So there are two stories really to tell about sort of why the games took off in the 70s and 80s. The first one is the innovation in the type and the style of lottery tickets that become available. Scratch tickets are introduced for the first time in Massachusetts in 1974, and they're like a huge phenomenon when they're introduced. 4 years later, New York introduces the first lotto game, which is the rollover jackpot game that we now know as, Powerball, Mega Millions, and California Lottery, things like that. And that's like a huge mania in the 80s. That's a huge craze at the time. And then there's also, I should add, the Daily Numbers game, which is sort of a direct copy of the illegal lottery that was really, really popular in urban African-American communities. States start adding their own version of it also in the mid-70s. So really, the expanding player base, one part of the story is about the innovations in the style and the number of games, not to mention their availability and the fact that more and more states keep adding lotteries, which is going to sort of naturally increase sales. That's one big part of the story. The other part, in my telling, and this, again, you wouldn't be a historian if you didn't have this side of it, is the state of the American economy and the access to upward mobility, particularly in the 1970s and 1980s. That the 1970s is notorious as this period of high inflation and high unemployment at the same time, which economic doctrine had previously said was impossible, which, again, I think accounts for not just the popularity of lottery tickets, but particularly why it's northeastern states that are going in on the lottery economy, this sort of manufacturing hotbed that's particularly affected by the rising deindustrialization of the 1970s, and the blue-collar workers who are most affected by that downturn as well, who are sort of turning to gambling, and this is going to be a trend going forward as sort of an alternative chance, let's say, at the American dream.
Right. Yeah, I think, I totally used to be, you mentioned like the snobbery earlier. I mean, I was totally like one of those guys like, it's a tax on people who are bad at math. And I've definitely come around on that, I think, partially thanks to your book. I want to read a quote. I want to read a quote. I love this quote this is from your book, quote from a man whose name escapes me because I didn't copy it over here, but quote, "The lottery is for dreamers and fools," one Virginia gambler acknowledged in 1991. But any way you slice it, the lottery still gives a working stiff a better chance than the big bosses. And to me, that really illustrates the rationality, actually, of playing the lottery, because it's not that you are, on one hand, you have a slow and steady climb out of your social standing into the next rung up, and on the other hand, you have this like gambling problem. It's actually, on the one hand, you feel like you have zero chance, and any chance, no matter how infinitesimal, is still a chance. And so that feels way more rational to me.
That's right. I think it's totally understandable. From having talked to a lot of lottery players, and I visited 20 states over the course of my research and spent more time than I should have just sort of hanging out in convenience stores and chatting with people as they were buying tickets. And I think it's totally reasonable for someone, not even necessarily someone who is actually poor and sort of struggling with access to resources. I mean, even someone who's like working, has a steady job, has some modicum of financial security, but doesn't see a chance at a better life any other way. I think it's totally understandable why that person would be interested in the lottery, might be prone to investing a little bit more money than they should in the lottery, as this, I use the phrase, last, best, and only chance at a new life. And just to finish the story, this is something that happens in the 80s that really changes this, which is the changing definition, let's say, of the good life or of the American dream, which is from sort of this white picket fence story of financial stability to opulence, luxury, and wealth as being sort of the definition of success. And I think whatever, Gen Z, it seems to be pushing back against that vision, which is all well and good. But for a lot of people, that sort of locked in, I think, is that vision of wealth. And lo and behold, this is when Lotto, these big rollover jackpot games, are starting in different states. And also, as that quote that you read alludes to, it's really, really hard to get, not just to get financial security for some people in the 70s and 80s, but to get wealth and opulence like you're seeing on Dynasty or on the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. That's impossible. And the lottery is really the only mechanism these people have, lots of people have to this day, of getting, again, not just security and stability, but actual wealth, which has become synonymous with success.
Right. It's interesting. Yeah, there's more than two, I'm sure, but there's two different effects we kind of were just talking about. There's the effect of like, I don't have any opportunity or chance outside of this. And then there's also the changing definition of what success and wealth means. Part of what I found fascinating in your book was about how the lottery, as you just mentioned, followed that. So the jackpots get bigger and bigger. You mentioned how in the 60s lottery drawings were more frequent, higher probability, but less payout. Am I getting that right?
They were less frequent, but more probable, more likely odds of winning, and then much, much, much lower payout. Like the first jackpot was 9 different jackpots of $600,000 each in 1964, and as you alluded to at the top last week, there was like a $1.5 billion jackpot. Yeah, we've come a bit of a long way.
Yeah, so it's like the consistency of the lottery in the 60s matches the sort of like desire for the definition of success as being like, consistently working your way to the next rung, whereas the windfall of the 80s and 90s more closely matches the idea of wealth in the 80s and 90s. I think that's really interesting.
And I'll say part of that is demand driven. I think just frankly, I think a lot of the reason the prices are getting bigger is because that's what people want. And even if they don't know what they want, but I think we have this, this is sort of foundational to the field of behavioral economics, but this overestimation of the belief in good things happening to you. So, for example, I think it's really easy to tell the difference between like a $4 million jackpot, a $40 million jackpot, and a $400 million jackpot. But it's impossible for your brain to wrap your head around the difference between 1 in 40 million odds, 1 in 400 million odds, or 1 in 4 billion odds. You just can't even begin to comprehend 1 in 4 million odds. So it might as well be 1 in 4 billion, because who cares? And this way I just get to win more money. But it actually does make a big difference. And we could be making a lot more millionaires, but we've decided instead to make 1 or 2 billionaires.
Yeah, that is interesting. Because I mean, even knowing statistics and math, like I still have that like, okay, well, the odds are low. Like once it gets to a certain point, it becomes in your brain, it becomes odds low. Whereas you actually can kind of conceive like, well, $400 million, that's maybe 2 yachts. So
right. It's really easy to like fake spend that money in your head. But the number winning the Mega Millions is sticking an ant onto 4 football fields and stabbing a pin into the ground and hitting the ant. But like maybe we could just do 1 football field. I don't think anyone would, like, even that is hard to comprehend, but that would still result in like a $50 million jackpot or something. But again, I think our brains are just not suited to think about sums of money that are that big and odds that are that big. We just can't do it.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about a conceptual framework that you have in your book. I really liked this idea of culture of chance versus culture of control. So can you tell our audience a little bit about what you mean by those terms?
Yeah, and I'll just give credit where it's due that I sort of stole or borrowed this phrase from a historian named Jackson Lears, who happened to have been my graduate advisor. So I'm going to get in big trouble if I don't mention him by name. In his book, Something for Nothing, Luck in America. And the idea behind the culture of control and the culture of chance is that we've had these two competing ethoses, let's say, throughout American history. One is the culture of control, which I think it will be really familiar to people, which is that basically all of life's outcomes are under your control, and that you can, through positive thinking or through any other means, you can affect the things that happen to you, and that fundamentally you are responsible for your own outcomes in every way. And that's the story of, to use Lears's prototype, of the self-made man, which is a self-made man is not someone who got lucky. He's someone who, through hard work and gumption, who made it. And again, it's all through control, by which we mean sort of personal responsibility and hard work. And that is a big through line, I think, in American history. And that it's contrasted in this telling with this culture of chance, which is that all of life is totally haphazard and random, and no one knows anything. And if you're wealthy, it's not because you're better than me. It's not because you're more deserving. It's just because you struck it rich. You bought stocks at the right time. You were born into the right family through some any other means. So there's this tension throughout American history between these two ideas. There's sort of a push and pull, and the lottery and gambling in general sort of firmly, obviously, falls down on the side of culture of chance, which is this acknowledgement that all of life's arrangements are just haphazard and don't actually mean anything. And again, the rich people aren't any better than you. They're just luckier than you and wealthier than you. And again, their wealth doesn't mean anything about them. It doesn't say anything about them. It just says that they were lucky. And the lottery, by offering any person a chance to become wealthy like that, is very much in that line, and this implication, this idea that, yeah, wealth is just a roll of the dice. It's not any ethical, moral, religious. We haven't even gotten to the religious side of it. It's not any sort of religious, divine blessing. It's just luck.
Yeah, I mean, you said tension. That tension is palpable, and that's part of why I liked that framework, is because it really crystallizes sort of this tension that you can see today. I mean, that's like you see, the bootstraps mentality even today, where if somebody, typically people that are more wealthy, elite, will have this sense that nothing is luck, right? Nothing is luck. The subtext there being it can't be, because for me to have gotten where I am, there only could have been my effort. There can't be any luck. So there definitely feels like there's this push and pull depending on your station. I'll also say that it seems like, the lottery just takes this existing tension and like pours a bunch of gasoline on it, right? The payout and the chance is so low, and the change in station is so great that it just really hypercharges both sides of this coin. So what do people do? Like when they win the lottery, are they accepted in the, in the nouveau riche type sense, or are they not? And how do they feel about it?
Right. So I haven't used the word yet, but what we're really talking about is the idea of a meritocracy, which is whether people who deserve it get rich, or whether people who are rich deserve it. That's sort of the fundamental question here. And exactly as we've been saying, a lottery spits in the face of a meritocracy. And I do have a bunch of evidence from the 70s and 80s, really mostly from the 70s, before lottery sort of really took off into the cultural mainstream, of people sort of looking down on lottery winners as someone who, again, whose wealth doesn't match their merit. Because, again, they got their wealth through luck, not through hard work, not through other means that would say something about their character. Anecdotally, I know someone who knows someone who won a sort of fairly sizable jackpot. Maybe it was very, very low, 9 figures, and who sort of has made that the defining moment of their life, so to speak. Like, of course it is. And if I won $100 million, it would be the defining moment of my life. But I think this person was like a doctor and already had financial stability, but somehow this blessing, and we should be explicit that a lot of people do see their lottery wins in religious terms as divine blessings, that more than their hard work, more than everything they've done before, as saying something about them. Let me maybe just add a better anecdote. There's a great quote from Mario Puzo, who wrote the Godfather series, who talks about how when he got a check for his first book, it brought him some amount of joy, but the amount of joy that it brought him did not pale in comparison in the slightest to when he would go to a blackjack table and win half of that amount, because it's somehow winning through gambling just like marks you as blessed, as deserving, as a winner, I think is the word. Whereas getting money through work, getting money other ways doesn't mark you in exactly the same way.
That's so interesting, because it almost like my assumption would be the opposite, right? My assumption would be the meritocratic idea of, winning I kind of feel bad about. Whereas, the hard work.
Like you cheated the system.
Yeah. You mentioned how the divine and religious folks tend to have a different way of maybe looking at it when they win. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this is something that I found going back to the 70s and that I think is still with us. And that is lottery winners, especially, who see their jackpots as divine blessings, as gifts from God. And this is, and I know you're interested in this subject, sort of fits in neatly with the prosperity gospel and this belief that sort of God plays, specifically a Protestant Christian God, plays an active role in the universe and sort of responds to people's requests and will reward them with health, with wealth, especially in response to giving money to the church or the right kinds of prayers. But a lot of lottery winners to this day will thank God for their jackpots. And what is particularly notable here is that this is, as far as I can tell, a completely unique American phenomenon. There are studies from Taiwan, from South Africa, from Sweden that have find very, very limited examples of lottery winners who sort of point heavenward and thank God for their jackpot.
Do you have a sense of whether they have other sorts of I don't want to necessarily say supernatural, but something that they point to, or are they more comfortable with the idea? Are they more comfortable with the culture of chance?
Exactly. I think you're getting exactly to, I think, what's important, which is in Sweden, I know because there's a whole book about lottery winners. In Sweden, it really is about chance and just people just sort of shrugging their shoulders and saying they got lucky. And what we have in the United States with these lottery winners are people who are taking the lottery, which is the quintessential vehicle of chance in American society, and they are transforming it into another part of the meritocracy. And they are saying, actually, this looks like the culture of chance, but it's really the culture of control because I prayed to win, or I played my dead grandmother's numbers in the lottery, and it came up because I'm deserving it, and my ship has come in, and this is because I'm being rewarded, and I deserve it.
So wild.
So this is, again, you're taking the quintessential vehicle of the culture of chance, and you're making it a part of this culture of control instead.
The American dream is very powerful.
One hell of a drug.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing though is I was talking about this with my co-host because we read the second chapter of your book is mostly about this, and it's hard for me to frame this really precisely because I'm an atheist materialist, but in this weird way it kind of feels like extremely low probability events like winning the lotteries is sort of a divine event. If you take out the requirement of, God needs to be this dude in the sky with a beard, and you think about it in a more broad sort of new agey universe sense, there is something there's something that feels weirdly divine about something like that happening, like the doctor you mentioned who's ostensibly has a great career. Everybody wants the doctor is that's the top tier, right? Of I want my kids to be a doctor. So the fact that he had that notion of winning the lottery as the defining moment of his life seems to, I don't know. It seems like there is some sort of divine thing, that divine intervention that happens there, even if you don't believe in God.
Yeah. I think what you're getting at is sort of goes back to what we were talking about before too, which is just the human mind's ability to sort of wrap your head around insanely improbable events. And if you're not willing to just lean in and say, yep, I stabbed a needle into 4 football fields and I hit the ant. If you're not willing to just acknowledge that, there's sort of really only one thing you can do, which is say there must have been some providence, some plan, something else to explain why this happened to me. To put it in the framing of one economist, it's really easy to say, oh, this happened to me, even though, of course, someone, somewhere, sometime is going to win the lottery. But the odds that person is going to be you today with these numbers seems like it says something more about you than it really does.
Yeah, it breaks your brain a little bit, right? I mean, what you were just talking about gets almost to it goes beyond lottery and gets into the existential questions of solipsism, right? Where it's do other people even exist? Right.
Am I in the Truman Show because I won the lottery?
Exactly. Right. And I have to imagine that truly huge windfalls must feel that way and must have a psychological effect in that manner.
Well, I'd love to find out. How's that?
Yeah, same. Yeah. Actually, I played the. I was going to ask you. I've been this week. I'm playing the lottery just as a part of the research. So if the numbers come up, if I leave the interview early, you'll know why.
Right, exactly. If this never gets posted, we never hear from you again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Did you play when you were doing? First of all, how long was the research that you did for $1 in a Dream?
So I started work on it in the summer of 2015, and then the book came out in 2022.
So did you play the lottery during that time?
Yes and no. Every state that I went to, I would buy a scratch ticket because, in part, I'm the only weirdo who's going to read the fine print on the back of every scratch ticket to compare the cash terms. Oh, in Georgia, you have 180 days to catch a winning ticket, but in Connecticut, you only have 90 days. Something like that. So just have again, real interesting stuff that definitely made it into the book. But just to have a nice little collection. But yes, I definitely sort of a victim of my own education, my own edification. When I was growing up, my parents, every once in a while would buy a ticket when the jackpot got big, but I definitely became more attuned to the lottery, obviously, from doing research on it, and would buy tickets a lot more frequently than I don't know if I'd ever purposefully bought a lottery ticket outside of a big jackpot, and maybe even then I had never done it until I started work on the book. And in part, it's sort of exactly as you alluded to, I found myself to be 100% victim or prey to the same sort of like dreams and imaginations that come when you buy a ticket and you're waiting a day for the drawing to happen. Maybe I can only speak for myself. I don't know if this is happening to you this week. But also even just to learn how these scratch tickets work and sort of be able to be conversant when talking with lottery players, oh, wait, why'd you buy that ticket? Blah, 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 just to sort of see what they're up to and where their mind is at.
Sure. Yeah. I think I am experiencing that, to be honest. So I bought a scratcher and I bought so it's actually kind of complicated. California has like 3 or 4 different lotto drawings. And so that was part I'm like, I needed to figure out how this is going. But I bought 3 of the lotto tickets. There's like one that's weekly, one that's biweekly, and then another one that I'm still not sure yet. But I definitely have that sort of like, well, this is for the show, but it would be cool if, like you can't there's like this magnetic pull of the of the fantasizing, I guess.
And I know people, just for the record, who do plenty of fantasizing without ever buying a ticket. They'll like see the billboard on the side of the road and be like, oh man, how would I spend like $900 million? And yet maybe for gamers like you and me, you got to have that real skin in the game to really feel like you have a chance. I feel that way a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to mention the gaming thing too, because I think that does, because I don't, like I'm the same as you where I haven't historically played the lottery, and if I have bought a ticket, I don't even know if I've ever bought a ticket, but if I have, it's been like, oh, everybody in the whole country bought one because it's $1 billion. More of a shared experience, right?
Right.
And I think part of that is the mechanics to me are more important. The game mechanics as a gamer, game designer too. Like I can't get over the mechanics of the fact that it's like negative expected value and the probability and all that. Like that seems to like weigh very heavily in my mind, even though I now have like a different, like I used to also say, and it's irrational, but I actually don't think that it's irrational, but I still have that same trepidation. That being said, with the trepidation, I still feel the pull to fantasize.
Yeah. And I have the same impulse as you do, is to try to gamify it and say, oh, a $2 scratch ticket is a better value than a $1 scratch ticket, even though I don't have a proof of the expected value, but I know the prize distribution is a little bit better. But again, at the end of the day, yeah, your expected value is negative. The scratch ticket was printed, 6 months ago at a warehouse in Georgia, and you're now just scratching it off. And that, it gives you the illusion of control and that you are involved. Yeah. But really, it's just peeling off a layer of plastic. Like you're not actually doing anything. But yeah, this belief that you can gamify it somehow, it's a really strong impulse that is unfortunately totally futile.
Yeah, the scratcher too that I got, it sat on my counter yesterday for a few hours before I finally did it. And as I've been sort of reflecting, I'm like, I think I was enjoying the ticket for those few hours more than I was after I did the scratch, right? There's this like Schrodinger's jackpot that was like sitting on my counter. And then when I actually finally scratched it off, I was like, oh, okay, never mind. I feel empty now.
And that took 7 seconds of your life, right? To scratch it. Yeah. Right. So you can imagine a lot of scratch tickets, if anyone has ever been to a convenience store, right, are played sort of on the counter, on the spot, and the winnings for small prizes, let's say up to $20, are invariably turned back into more tickets. And the cycle continues until folks sort of run out of money. And there's really just chasing either that Schrodinger uncertainty, as you noted, or they're just chasing that big jackpot, which unfortunately never comes.
Yeah. The gamer in me that wants to min-max this, though, is thinking like, well, what if I bought a ticket and like held on to it for a week? Would I have like a week of like fantasy enjoyment before I, spent that 7 seconds to crush it all? Or...
Right. Until in a single moment of loss of impulse control, you would just scratch it. And then it would all... But so this is part of the appeal of a game like Powerball, like Mega Millions, like California Lotto, where there's a couple days or maybe a week between drawings and there's not much you can do to control it. Is that at Wednesday at 11 p.m. is when I'm going to find out if I'm a billionaire or not.
Right.
And parentheses, no, but yes.
And all of the millions of people get to have that same sort of like, I might be a billionaire for, 3-4 days.
Right. So there is, and you alluded to collective experience. In the 1980s, the collective experience of buying a lottery ticket was really, really strong, in part because a lot of states didn't yet have quick pick. So every single person who bought a ticket had to fill out one of those little Scantron sheets with their lottery numbers.
I remember those.
And then people like you who never buy lottery tickets like don't know how those work, so you have to wait. And then the line is like getting longer and longer, and people are getting mad, but you don't know this is your first time buying tickets. You just want to be part of it. But there really was this collective experience to buying lottery tickets at the time, and there still is a little bit today from my spending a lot of time, as I've said, in convenience stores. But what we have, the degree to which there's a collective experience now, it is isolated but collective, meaning it is lots of people, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, each in their own homes, looking at their own numbers at the same time, waiting to find out if they're a winner.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe tweeting about it, but probably not really, just sort of being private with their dreams, all dreaming at the same time, expectantly and waiting and hoping.
I mean, that's super powerful. Before we get to my last couple questions here, you kind of triggered a thought here with talking about the, gamifying the experience and min-maxing and whatnot. I think you mentioned this. You either mentioned this in one of your other interviews or in the book. People tend to like the distribution of guesses when people don't use quick pick aren't fully random. They tend to be like closer to numbers 1 through 31 because people use like their birth dates, for example.
Right.
So is that something that still happens, or most people using quick pick?
I think for big games like Powerball and Mega Millions, most people still use quick pick. The data on this is hard to access for sort of mortals like me who don't work at a lottery commission.
Gotcha.
I'm sort of continuously interested in the phenomenon of people playing numbers that are quote unquote lucky.
Yeah.
I guess they think that their dead grandma will help bring them luck and help them win, or that if they do win, it will be more meaningful in some way if they hit with those numbers. I'm curious for your take on this, but it is definitely a phenomenon that I still see, that still happens, of people playing numbers, especially for the 3 and 4 digit daily games, because those are sort of a lot quicker to sort of process your numbers than and you don't need 6 or 7 numbers, you just need 3 or 4.
Right.
But I'm curious as to why you think that, as an outsider, sort of why you think that would have appeal for people.
I mean, I think it comes down to the sort of like luck. I was actually going to ask this too. Like, is luck something that happens to you, or is it like an inherent property of a thing, right? Like, and I feel like the people that have the lucky numbers, and then sort of like, the post facto, like I won, therefore I must have been a lucky person. No, I didn't get lucky. I was a lucky person.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just kind of feeds into that like luck does feel like it's a hidden property. Like you were always going to win this. It was a hidden property of these magical numbers, it wasn't decided when the balls were selected.
Right. Well, and just to take it even further, there are all these examples from the 80s of lottery winners who would become like quasi celebrities at the time, like people like rubbing their faces and hands, like trying to like rub off some of their luck, as if it was inherently them who were the lucky ones.
Yeah.
And there is a phenomenon to this day of when a store sells a winning lottery ticket, it sees a disproportionate increase in lottery sales, even though every ticket number combination can be purchased at any lottery retailer in the country. It is somehow that store is imbued and sort of they're some of the luck is rubbed off on them, or they are blessed, even though of course they are no more or less likely than any other store to sell a winning ticket going forward.
Right. Yeah. Huh. That makes total sense with the magical stores.
Like it makes sense, but it doesn't.
It makes psychological sense,
right,
but even though it doesn't make mathematical sense.
Right.
So is the $1 million advice here then for our listeners? Is that so if I go play numbers, I don't do quick pick, I play numbers and I pick outside of that 1 to 31 range, it's the same chance of winning. However, I have less chance of splitting my winnings because there are fewer picks in that range. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
All right.
Assuming
So if you're going to play.
Assuming you trust yourself to be a better random number generator than quick pick, which is an actual random number generator.
Well, isn't any number. I mean, I could pick, numbers 36, 37, 38, 39. I mean, that still has any chance as any other series of numbers,
absolutely.
Right?
Okay, well, when I see your name on the news because you won with the first consecutive lottery numbers in the nation's history, then I'll be ruining the day that I doubted you. Yeah.
Right. I'll say this is dedicated to John Cohen,
who never believed in me. Yeah.
Why did you title your book? You called it $1 and a Dream. Why did you title it that way?
So the simplest answer, right? $1 and a Dream is the name of, or was the slogan of a late 1980s New York State lottery commercial. All you need is $1 and a dream was sort of the tagline, which is how I got alerted to it. I did not get alerted to it through the J. Cole album called $1 and a Dream, but I don't think people confuse us on Google very often, either our work or our appearance. The subtitle, which landed at state lotteries in modern America, that changed a lot and had many, many iterations. But I will say $1 and a Dream, I stuck with it basically from the start, in part because, first of all, I really like the inclusion of the word dream. I think that's sort of really what this is all about fundamentally. And for $1 and a Dream, I think speaks to, and I wanted something that spoke to both sides of this, that speaks to both the players' side and the state side in terms of the explanation of their pursuit of gambling. And they're, as we've said, people are playing for $1 for the money. They're also playing for this dream of what the money would symbolize. States, again, are pursuing non-tax revenue, but they're also playing, quote unquote, for a world where they never have to pay for education ever again or something. So again, I think it's all about dreams, and I really wanted something that captured, to use your word, the parallel between the states and the gamblers, and I hope I've done that effectively.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why I asked this, is I thought that it was such an apt title after reading it. And it also, like, the whole dream thing it speaks to that, like, deeper current in America that we went to a little bit too, of like, part of what drove the growth of this was the crumbling of one dream needed to be replaced with another dream, right? Like the crumbling of this post-war social contract. People need some sort of dream, so they go to this. And we see that with MLMs as well. Like that's why there's a podcast called The Dream by Jane Marie. And it's the same. The title, I feel like it hits all the same notes, right? Is that it's about this American dream and what is replacing that when it seems impossible for you to achieve.
Right. And this is something that I learned at the feet of my advisor, Grace Hale, who writes about this in her book, about how dreams feel like they are ahistorical and just everybody has dreams and that's it, but they are really socially, culturally, historically grounded, and sort of the circumstances of your life, the circumstances of your era really shape your aspirations for the future, whether you know it or not. And there's not a lot of like data out there about dreams and about imaginations and what people want, but again, just to take our example in terms of what a lottery jackpot represented in the 70s, which was financial stability and sort of upper middle class life, and then in the 80s all of a sudden it represents opulence and being the richest person in your town or on your block or whatever. That is a change in the dream, and again a dream feels like it's just like fundamental, and a dream is a dream, but no, it really changes in scope and in scale over time.
Yeah, and also like whether it's being fed or not, like that seems like that's kind of part of the story here. So on our show, we have a bunch of criteria for what constitutes a cult or not. It's, by the way, not an academic term, so it's very much colloquial.
Right. That quote this is from some scholar. A cult is a 4-letter word for religion that I don't like.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We have a criteria for that actually. There's like we say, is it niche within society is one of our criteria. So it's like. If it hits all the other things, but it's niche, then that means it's probably a cult because it's not the mainstream thing. Right.
Like I listened to your episode about Starbucks. You know what I mean? Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah.
So there's also some huge undercurrents that cut through a lot of the groups and ideas we discussed. And then one of that is this notion we've talked about here about unmet need, and cults tend to provide an unmet need. And that's actually our preferred framework for talking about like what appeals to people. Like brainwashing is something that people talk about, but it isn't really scientifically supported. So this unmet need is a much better framework for understanding why people get into this kind of stuff. And I'll just give for example, this can be a social need. So something like QAnon can be so sticky because of the social glue. People spend time online chatting with other like-minded people that are interested in the same things, as shitty as they may be. But another thing that even QAnon and other cult-like groups make them so sticky is that they provide hope, or I guess in the parlance of what we were talking about a minute ago, they fulfill a dream that seems otherwise impossible or unattainable in other ways. And like really hopelessness is super intolerable. So it's a powerful draw. So I apologize for the long wind up, but given all of that, would you consider the state lottery apparatus, like both the players and the politicians, to be involved in a type of cult-like belief system because of the way that it exploits that lack of hope, that dream?
I think, to take your framework, I think lotteries are definitely filling unmet sort of psychological need for people, and maybe sort of for American society writ large, which is, if you think about it, it really is sort of the one escape hatch, so to speak, sort of in American society for extreme wealth. Let me take the other examples, that often get lumped in with lotteries, things like sports betting or crypto or Robinhood stock trading. All of those are ways to make money sort of through gambling, I would call gambling, but they all require, if you want to win a lot of money, you need to spend a lot of money, right? There aren't a lot of like stocks where you can put a very, very small amount of money and get a huge, huge return instantaneously. And that's what the lottery provides that no other sort of aspect of American society can offer, which is even someone with a very, very small amount of disposable income can, however improbable, buy a chance at $1 billion or many, many millions of dollars. And that is, it's a need that should be met or not. That is a hope for wealth, for stability, for whatever you want to call it, that exists nowhere else in society, that the lottery is providing to people on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think you call it transformative wealth in the book. I like that vocab word because it cuts to the idea that like the lottery provides this like quantum leap that you don't really get via other means.
Right. And so that's my question sort of is, okay, if the lottery didn't exist, right, if it wasn't just like out there that you knew in the back of your head at all times, oh, okay, I'm not wealthy, but like maybe I'll win the lottery, right? Like that's like sort of in the back of people's heads, even people who aren't lottery players, is like, oh, there's still a chance for me to win. So if that didn't exist, I don't know what the consequences would be, but that I think would take away a lot of hope for a lot of people. Or, and again, at least that's why I use the word sort of this escape hatch, right? Just like the last chance, desperate attempt. People know how improbable it is, but they really don't see another way that it might come about for them.
Yeah, you just tickled my brain there with the idea of like how would I feel if, as a non-lottery player, how would I feel if that safety net was taken away? Like, is that actually providing something for me even though I don't play? I kind of feel like the answer is yes.
Right. Like you might still imagine being rich, but you would probably feel a little bit sillier about it because there isn't a way in American society sort of that maybe you have the side hustle of all, maybe the podcast takes off, I don't know. But
yeah, this is my lottery ticket.
Right. Well, I hope it wasn't this episode. I'll tell you that. But right. Maybe you just feel a little bit sillier, right? Imagining being wealthy when there really isn't a chance realistic and of any part of society that wealth might come about. Whereas in this current iteration, all right, I'm going to buy a lottery ticket next time the jackpot gets $1 billion. Maybe I'll hit it. Who knows?
Yeah.
So I wonder. It's an interesting counterfactual.
And it may not even be a sillier thing. It may just be like what, like in that bizarro world where lottery doesn't exist. It just might be more difficult for me to conceptualize that at all. And is that just having that ability to conceptualize that, the ability to fantasize, that feels like that is enough of a panacea in some ways.
And not to bring this sort of too concretely into the boring policy technocratic world, but that is why one of the solution sort of policy proposals that I have for sort of fixing lotteries is putting caps back on the size of jackpots, which we used to have all the time. The jackpot couldn't get above X hundred millions of dollars or whatever. And again, I think we could tamp down people's dreams a little bit or just sort of maintain some slightly more realistic expectations just ever so slightly and make a big difference in people's lives.
Yeah. Well, I mean, given what we talked about in terms of like how people behaviorally respond to like low probability versus high reward, given the tremendous bias we have in one direction, it feels like that would be a good countervailing force for that.
Yeah. And again, it's demand driven, right? Why we have these big jackpots that are so much more improbable. But I think ultimately we could use with a little less lottery playing, fewer billionaires and a couple more millionaires would be sort of my ideal arrangement if the games are to continue to exist.
Yeah. Also, everywhere else. That would be nice.
Yeah. And also if I was one of the millionaires, that'd be cool too. But
Yeah.
I'm not asking for too much. Yeah.
Right. Just a million. I just want to buy a house in California. All right. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention or talk about? Do you have anything you're working on after post Dollar in a Dream?
Well, yeah, his name is Caleb. He's 18 months old. So I'm working on changing a lot of diapers in my spare time. Yeah, I mean, I have my eyes on, let's say, on the sports gambling world and what this is doing to people, and especially an argument, I can't remember the author's name, but it was an article in the Free Press about basically calling sports gambling the new opioid crisis as something that is happening beneath the surface that is not on a lot of people's radar yet, but that is affecting a lot of people who, just like the opioid crisis, happen to be disproportionately white, and is sort of wreaking havoc on a lot of people's lives in a way that we are all blind to, but in 10 years might be sort of a big issue nationwide. Yeah,
I think that's actually a great idea. I mean, we had a referendum here in California, I think last year, the year before, about that. I forget. I think we voted no.
Yeah. But in part because the tribal casinos, which want to preserve their sort of monopoly, mobilized against
strange alliances, right? Yes. Yeah. It was a very interesting sort of like Game of Thrones there that ended up making things go the way that it did. But I think that would be very fertile ground. I as someone who has enjoyed sports betting in Vegas, but I don't do it on FanDuel or whatever, I am actually surprised at the rapid growth. And I would love to learn more about what's driven that and where it's going and yeah, I hadn't heard the analogy to the opioid crisis. That's that's interesting.
And talk about a cult, for the record. I think Las Vegas, if you don't have an episode, or if that's not on your list of potential cults, I think that's fertile ground for you and an excuse for you guys to make a trip. How's that?
Oh, wow. Okay. You know what? I think you need to be consulting for the show, because that's actually a fantastic idea.
But yeah, it's a wild world, and again, definitely filling, and was until recently especially filling an unmet need in American society.
Sure. Yeah. Another lots of dollars and dreams going in there.
Dreams. Yep.
Speaking of which, I'll just plug the book one more time, because not because you're here even, but because I liked it. I thought it was super interesting, and there's a lot we didn't even cover. So maybe I'll talk about that more with Kayla, my co-host. But there's like other chapters that we didn't even really touch on here. So there's still plenty to read for folks who want to go grab it. And it's also like, for a historical, like, academic book, it flows. Like, it's pretty much a page turner. Like, it's not, sometimes with books like that, it's kind of, this is a bit of a slog, but yours wasn't. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to turn your page through half of a chapter about the 1960s budget crisis in the state of New Jersey, which I've never heard described as a page turner, but I'm very glad to hear it.
Well, you do. I think part of what it is you do a really good job of bringing in like a lot of personal narratives to kind of ground everything. And that's just going to be compelling. So
yeah, no, I think it's all about the people, and even the stuff that's about politicians, right, is really about these people are creating a system and putting a game in place. It is a game that is going to affect a lot of people. And so what that effect, that's sort of, I think, the story that we have to tell.
To unpack here.
Yes.
Where do you want to start? Actually, first thing I'll note is that we were having a cool conversation in our live broadcast room where we were broadcasting this on Discord. So we're going to try to bring up a couple of the points that some of our patrons made. So if you're a patron, then you get access to this Discord channel where you can listen to us live record. I mentioned that at the top of the show. And you can also chat. And so there were some cool chats in here that people were talking like, oh, this is an interesting part of the interview. I don't know. I think for me, the most interesting part is like how is maybe that chance culture versus control culture, or I guess he called it culture of chance versus culture of control, because I think that framework like underpins a lot of, I don't know, like a lot of the way we think about like economic success and whether people are like truly like deserving of the money they make. Like I think we talked about that before we even listened to the interview, right? I forget if we talked about that.
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I work in a field that is inherently very lucky if you get into it. Like is inherently, there is a lot of chance that goes into being able to sustain a career as a creative in any field, and particularly as a creative in film and television. It is notoriously very difficult. Like I think that the kind of numbers that are thrown around every year when somebody is admitted into the WGA is that there are fewer people admitted into the Writers Guild of America each year than make it into Major League Baseball. Like that's the kind of numbers that we're talking about. Obviously still, low probability that we can wrap our minds around. So, we can comprehend it, but still low probability. And it requires so much talent and skill and work. And also the luck and the chance is an inextricable part of it.
Yeah.
And so I in myself know, like, hell yeah, I worked really hard to get where I am and I deserve this money when I have a job. And also it's, good Lord, am I lucky to be here, and I do not deserve this any more than anybody else who I came up with as an assistant who hasn't been able to make the jump yet, or somebody who doesn't live in Los Angeles, or any other schmuck on the street. I don't deserve it, quote unquote, more than them. I'm not the best writer. I'm not the best writer in the world. I'm a good writer.
Yeah, no, I am.
But I'm not. It's you.
Yeah.
I am not. I do not have the job that I have solely based on control. It is so much chance.
Yeah, I feel like in like our daily lives, it's like kind of obvious that that's true. But like when it starts getting into the realm of rhetoric,
sure,
there's just like, why do we just go to the extremes of it? Like why? And I guess I can answer that for billionaires because like their wealth is so extreme that they have to have like a very extreme view of like what, whether any luck played any role in that at all. But yeah, it feels like once you get to that discourse, all of a sudden it's like there's no like, well, some of it's luck and some of it's work hard. It's like all one or all the other. It's like you just got completely lucky, or like there's no such thing as luck and you are poor because you deserve it.
If we give luck the credit that it's due, then it shatters like the framework necessary to keep this broken system going. And
it sounds like it shatters like sort of like this American mythology too, because one of the interesting things he said was how other countries don't have the same like compulsion. They don't feel the same compulsion to like explain their winnings in these sort of like religious I deserved it terms. Like you mentioned, Sweden or China, these other countries that have that, because everybody gambles, and like some countries also have like lottery systems, state-run lottery systems. And it seems to be that, according to Dr. Cohen, those cultures don't have as much problem saying like, I just got really lucky and got a lot of money. Like they don't have the same compulsion to explain the meritocracy.
I think they also just have a different, he said something about, I wrote it down. He talked about how our dreams are actually socially and historically shaped.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm thinking of like Western European countries. People that grow up in Western European countries, obviously there's the same thing of like, oh, if I work hard, or oh, if I get lucky, like the dreams of fantastic wealth are still there. Mm-hmm. And it is a different type of society in which, I could be wrong, but from an outsider perspective, people are being born on more equal playing fields than they are in the United States. Whereas like in the United States, it feels like the only way to get out of certain quote unquote classes or certain conditions is divine intervention, is luck, is somebody bestowing a lottery upon you. But if you come up in a country where you're not constantly under the threat of like medical bankruptcy, I wonder if that just changes how you feel about luck and what it means and chance and those things.
Right. It's like okay for luck to exist if that's sort of the environment that you live in. And also like not just geographically, but temporally, right? One of the interesting things that he brought up and that comes up in his book is how in the 60s, the lottery sort of matched society a little more. Like even American society was more like had more of a social safety net.
Right.
And it was more about like living comfortably and like having your, basic American dream. of owning a house and, 2.5 kids.
Right.
And then the American dream sort of like transformed into, lifestyles of the rich and famous. You need to have 5 supercars and a yacht, and
greed is good.
You need to have, the name Trump needs to go on all of your buildings and jets. And so like we kind of moved into this world where it's like, winner take all capitalism, as it's been called.
Right.
And the lottery seems to have followed suit, right? Because the lottery in the 60s was it was more consistent that you win, but the winnings were less. And now it's the opposite. Now it's like way, way, way less likely that you win. But then the jackpots are like insane.
That like makes me depressed.
But it's like, but I get it though, because like it's hard to conceive like when you get I think we mentioned this in the interview. Once you get to like, I don't know, like 1 out of a million, probably even less than that, like your brain just sort of like buckets that all into very, very unlikely, right? Like it's anything beyond that, like 1 in a billion, very unlikely. 1 in a trillion, very unlikely. Like it's just, there's no real way for your brain to conceive like the differences between those probabilities. So you might as well, if you're the lottery system, you might as well go super low chance and super high payout, because that's what it's easier for your brain to absorb. And I also want to like just, I guess I'll just restate the quote, but that one lottery player's quote of like, he understands that the lottery is like a dumb thing to believe in. Like you play the lottery players play the lottery. No, like they're not dumb. Like they know that it's like infinitesimal odds and that it's like sort of like a fool's, what do you call it? Like a fool's dream. But he still feels like that's his only chance to like change his life station.
Yeah.
And that's like, when I read that, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like that kind of feels like that explains a lot of what we're talking about here.
If you're somebody who is living in techno-feudalism, you see this discourse all the time around capitalism of like, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism.
Yeah, because capitalism would monetize the end of the world.
Absolutely. So it's easier to imagine winning the lottery as a means to escape poverty than it is to imagine, you're going to like work your way up the like hierarchy ladder business.
Yeah, as irrational as it is to believe that you're going to win the lottery, it is even more irrational to believe that you're going to change your station in life by putting your head down and working a 9 to 5.
Right.
Like that's what's crazy here, and that's what I think the lottery capitalizes on. And there's sort of like another side to that coin that I had never really thought about, is that sort of like psychological safety net that he was talking about. Like even for me as a non-lottery player, like does the existence of the lot, does the fact that just it's there have some sort of like soothing effect, the like opiate of the masses effect, like for my brain to think like, well, even if I get super poor, I could fantasize about being rich. I'm fantasizing about being rich even as a middle class person.
Absolutely. I dream about, we're constantly going like, ooh, if you won the lottery, what would you do? And we don't play the lottery.
Yeah.
But having that idea of like, one day I could just happen upon a bunch of cash.
Right.
Is like, it would be really depressing without that. I mean, like I come up with non-lottery ways of like, ooh, what if I just like got a bunch of money? And like when I do come into money randomly, it's like I got $500 because I listed something on Depop, and I randomly got selected in a drawing of like, you posted something on Depop and we're giving away $500, and I actually got $500, and it was the greatest thing in the entire world.
That is amazing.
It was incredible.
That sounds just like the best day of your entire life.
I thought it was a scam.
That was another thing he was talking about, is like how much, like, I don't even know what the right word is, like joy, excitement, like just how much of an impact it is psychologically for people who, when they win stuff like this, it's like bigger. Like Mario Puzo was like, yeah, it was like when I win at blackjack, it's like bigger than when I sold The Godfather to Paramount. I'm just like, holy shit, that is both crazy, but it also like makes a weird amount of sense too.
Yeah. It's the bigger life-changing event in some ways. It's certainly the luckier event. The less likely to happen event in some ways.
Yeah. do you like if you won? Let's say you won the big one.
1.5 bill.
1.5.
Ooh.
Would you feel like Truman? Do you think? Do you feel like you'd be in the Truman Show? Would it break your brain?
I think it would break my brain, but I don't know if it would break my brain in that way. But probably, I mean, it would definitely, okay, that voice would be there. Like, I think about things, I have in my life felt like, on the Truman Show, or felt like there was some cosmic entity out there targeting me specifically.
Sure.
In a negative way. In like a, why do you keep doing this to me, God, kind of way.
Yep.
And I think that if I won $1.5 billion, that thought would absolutely come up of, there's some sort of cosmic entity that is doing this to me. I don't know. I would have multiple feelings about it. I think that like my rational brain would push back against it, but like that impulse would absolutely be there. I think it has to be. I think that's how the brain copes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how I would feel because like I have all of this background and training and statistics and probability, and I would sit here and love to sit here and think, yeah, that's going to insulate me from like having these like magical thinking, irrational thoughts of like, something's up, something's weird. Am I in the Matrix? Am I God?
Right.
But I don't know. Like the pull of that would be very strong, especially for something so absurdly extreme like $1 billion jackpot.
Right.
And this kind of dovetails a little bit into what one of our patrons was talking about on Discord here. Joy was talking about how it made her think a lot about like this sort of like focus on the individual. And this, it's like, I don't know, it's just inherently solipsistic in nature, right? Like, because like somebody has to win, like the guy,
right.
Like Dr. Cohen was saying, somebody has to win. But also, so like, it's like this inherent knowledge, you're inherently admitting that other people exist, right? Because somebody's got to win. But then, like, if you're the one that wins, all of a sudden that flips, and it's like, am I the only one that exists? Like, it's just,
how did it
just fucks with your
pick
brain.
Me? Yeah, it's kind of like what we were talking about yesterday of like, somebody who is born into a religion that they believe and think is, the divine promises of that religion are like the one true reality.
Right.
How do you square that with like, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Why was I so lucky to be born into the right one?
Into the correct religion.
And I think that if you do, I'm sure that people grapple with that all the time of like thinking about why was I this lucky? Why was I this fortunate? Why was I chosen to be born into the group that's right?
Yeah. And actually I'll just add like part of the discussion that we had yesterday. Like I was just saying how curious I was about that. So if any of you listeners out there like want to email us, like cultists or come into our Discord and talk about it. But you can always email us too at cultigistsweird@gmail.com. I personally am very curious how people, if you're a religious person, what is it that you like? How do you square that? What do you think about the idea that like yours is the one true religion and the other religions are wrong? Like, is that the mindset, or is the mindset more like, well, they're misguided? Or like, I'm really curious if you are somebody who is of religious nature listening to this podcast, please let us know. 'Cause I'm like super curious about that. But to come back from that branching topic there, to come back from that,
I have a comeback from that
tangent. Tangent. That's a tangent. To come back from that tangent.
Just continuing in this conversation of like the divine and religion and yada yada. I just want to point out that you guys talked about, well, in some sort of like new age woo-woo sense, isn't like improbable chance just the same thing as divine intervention? I just want to point out that came from me.
Oh, that's the important thing? Is that you want to take credit for something?
I said that first. I said that to you before you did your interview, and then you added it to your interview questions.
We're all so impressed.
I just want
Kayla.
credit where credit is due, and also I think that I am not like, I have no change in position even after listening to this interview. Like,
it still feels divine in a way.
Chance is
the finger of God.
It's the finger of God without there being like a bearded man in the sky, without there being a conscious.
So it's a disembodied hand. It's kind of like in Smash Brothers when you fight the hand.
I'm saying that chance is not the result of a super conscious entity making decisions,
Right.
but the utterly improbable happening to you is just the unconscious universe's version of divine intervention. If you are so lucky that you have the improbable thing happen to you, what's the difference between that and like, yeah, beard man going and you are now talking to a burning bush? You know what I mean?
RN Jesus.
RN Jesus.
That's what it is.
That's why you taught me that
Jesus.
term.
Yep. It's one of our patrons, or same patron actually, Joy, mentioned like the sort of Calvinist thinking that's like in this as well. And that is actually, if you totally should read his book. It's like so good. And there's a section in it where he does talk about like the historical roots of like Calvinism and like predestination, and how like that, like he like traces that in through like the Puritan notions of like the US Puritan notions that feed into prosperity gospel of like, I deserve this money. The reason I got this money must be because I was initially deserving.
Right.
That's exactly the sort of the mentality that a lot of lottery winners bring to that event of it winning, is like, well, I wouldn't have won this if I wasn't predestined, if I wasn't chosen by God, if I wasn't deserving.
See, I don't think that I would fall into that system of belief, but that's because I don't have that pre-existing system of belief.
Right. There's two more things I want to get to. One, I'm going to try to be quick about this because this is like a huge thing to unpack.
Great.
Like its own whole episode, maybe.
In the beginning.
No, the fact that numbers games and the lottery, so like numbers games are these sort of just like grassroots lottery systems. Numbers games are typically played in African American communities, and that's like basically the exact prototype for numbers games that state lotteries run. So like, the pick six, the Powerball, the blah, blah, blah. And so it's funny that like we're even culturally appropriating gambling.
That's what hegemonic white supremacist culture does.
It's good stuff. And actually, he gets into that more in the book too. I keep saying he gets it into the book. I promise he didn't pay me to like advertise any of this stuff, but like there is a whole part of the book where he talks about like the genesis of these numbers games, and it goes from being something that like is used to it's like actually a really bad appropriation, because it's like not that appropriation's good, but in this case it's like even worse because like it's illegal activity. So it is used as a cudgel by law enforcement to like when they want to go in somewhere and punish, a community, they can use numbers games because they know that it's going to be happening.
Right.
And simultaneously, it's also like a major like source. It's a major like inflow of corruption.
Yeah.
It's a major inflow of corruption for police forces too, because you go in, you're like, you guys better break up this numbers game unless I get a cut.
Oh my God.
So it's, I don't know, like maybe it was good that it got like statified, but like there's this whole other aspect of like the transformation of numbers games into like a state run system that's also really fascinating in the book. And then the final thing I want to talk about is just, do you remember? So we actually read this part together, and I gotta share it on the podcast. Do you remember the lawsuit?
Please talk about the lawsuit. The lawsuit was amazing.
Okay, I'm not gonna do it justice, but I'm gonna try. So apparently there was a lottery winner at one point who she had asked a friend, or maybe it was a family member, or it was like a close friend, hey, can you buy me a lottery ticket? And also, like with my money, like, I'm going to give you $5 to go buy the ticket. You're going to go buy it. And I've been praying on this for months and months and months. I really need you to pray on this for me too. I want you to pray. And
to a specific saint, to a specific.
Oh, it was to a specific saint.
I have been praying to God. I know that you are into this specific saint or entity. I need you to pray. I want you to pray to that. You buy the ticket for me with my money and pray to your saint, because you have a relationship with them, and that prayer will, maybe it'll win me the lottery.
Right. And now this probably happens hundreds of times, thousands of times a day. So why are we talking about this one? Well, this lady ended up winning on that ticket. And she, for whatever reason, decided not to share any of her winnings with this other person, which,
the person who prayed to the saint.
The person who prayed to the saint. I mean, as uncool as that is, I think, I guess it's her prerogative. It's her right as the person who owned, the lottery ticket, technically purchased the lottery ticket.
But it's not right.
But is it her right? It turned into a lawsuit. So the guy actually sued her saying, I deserve part of these winnings because I helped you win. I prayed to the saint. And then she, of course, defended the lawsuit. I forget exactly what it ended. Do you remember what happened with the...
I think originally it was thrown out, and then you appeal or whatever, and the second judge was like, no, actually, it doesn't matter. We don't have to be proving that the saint helped. You can't prove that the saint helped you win. You can't prove that. But we don't need to prove that. What we are litigating here is whether or not the lottery player believed that praying to the saint would help them win.
Yeah.
That is what was being litigated is, do I, as the person who's asking you to buy the ticket, believe that praying to that saint will help me win? If I believe that, and that happens, then the court did say, okay,
yeah,
you have to
some
share.
percentage.
Yeah.
I forget what the
I think it was
percentage
30% or 30-70, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. But it was just a fascinating story. The book's full of those. And it also reminded me of the Ramtha lawsuit too, where Jay-Z Knight, somebody else was saying that they could channel Ramtha. This is if you're a longtime listener, you know our episode on the Ramtha School of Enlightenment. So there's this channeler, Jay-Z Knight, channels Ramtha. Somebody else is like, oh, I'm also channeling this ancient spirit Ramtha. And
she was like, no, you're not.
And Jay-Z was sued her, basically saying, but it was for copyright.
Right.
Which is inherently saying, well, I'm making this up for money.
Right.
And she won the lawsuit. So it's but how can you have your, this is a real thing, this is a real spirit cake and eat it too? It kind of feels like the same here. How can you have your I deserve all these lottery winnings while also still believing that the prayer mattered? Just felt very similar to me. Anyway, I wanted to say that story because it's so good. And now we can talk about whether we think it's a cult or not.
I want to say one more thing.
No, I said two more things, and you didn't say one more thing.
It's very fast.
That makes 3 things, Kayla.
This is the third thing. Just one more thing that was pointed out by Jonathan Cohen in your conversation was the need to use fantastical terms to not only convince people to play, but to enact a lottery system. The fantastical, almost too good to be true terms of all of the rhetoric that's used to get people to play.
Yeah.
We talked about that, dreams and blah, blah, blah. But also the promises of you'll never have to collect taxes again in order to get states to enact a lottery system. I just thought that it was interesting to point out how important language and appealing to the fantastical, the divine, the kind of the too good to be true, the kind of doesn't make sense, how important that is across the board, not just for the lottery, but for a lot of the groups and the systems that we discuss. Yeah,
and that magical thinking that these state entities engage in. And actually if you read the book, some of the same causes, some of the same underlying causes are there too. So the same way that individual humans are get into sort of a desperate economic situation, state governments can kind of get into their own desperate economic situation where the taxes aren't covering all of the things that people want and all of the services that we need to provide. So we better start gambling on it. It's kind of some of the similar reasons too. Let me talk about my sources real quick, and then we'll do the criteria. It will be quick because my sources this time were just my own damn experience playing the California lottery. I think I ended up being down. I think I spent $60 and won 10.
Okay.
That's not too bad. So that was one of my sources, obviously, the book, A Dollar and a Dream by Jonathan D. Cohen, the interview with Mr. Cohen, and a variety of online articles about lottery winners. I won't go into every single different outlet, but there's a bunch of them. And
every 7-Eleven, smoke shop, liquor store,
in
gas
a
station
5-mile radius,
owner who was willing, or cash register operator who was willing to talk to us about how the lottery is played in their specific location.
So, Kayla, is there a charismatic leader for
I think we
the
need
lottery system?
Is define our terms.
Okay.
Are we talking about the California lottery? Are we talking about lottery systems in general?
I would say that the cult in this case is, maybe it's twofold.
Lottery players?
I would say it's either it's the lottery players and or we could even say state officials who create and manage lottery systems. I think we could talk about either of those. Maybe for the sake of clarity, let's stick with the first one. Like the lottery playing public and their beliefs about the lottery.
Then the charismatic leader is clearly, without a doubt, RN Jesus.
I thought you were going to say the Monopoly man.
Well, when I picture RN Jesus, that's who I picture.
That's who you picture?
Yeah.
You picture the Monopoly guy?
I don't know. What do you think? What do you think of charismatic leader? Is like the personification of hope enough to be a charismatic leader?
Yeah, I think that it kind of doesn't exist because...
The lottery does feel kind of faceless.
Yeah, it does. That's what I'm saying. I think you can definitely point to some, like spiritual entities here, like RN Jesus, or like the personification, the avatar of hope. But if we must have a charismatic leader be like an actual real human being, like Mary Kay or Jay-Z Knight, then I would say it doesn't really exist here.
Okay.
Okay, expected harm.
Oh, that's hard because it's like harm. You could say, oh, well, it's like taking advantage of people who don't have money to part with are spending their money on this. It could put them into financial situations. It could become addictive.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. And also, how do you weigh that against the hope that is maybe provided by a lottery system?
I think that this is where like it really starts to feel similar to other groups we've covered. And like one of the reasons why it made me go like, oh, we could talk about this on the show is because it feels very similar to something like, let's say, QAnon, where there's like this underlying problem that is the real problem. There's this like breakdown of trust and misinformation and the algorithm society that like pushes rage and blah, blah, blah. All of the things that sort of like underlie QAnon and like that's like the carcinogens. And then QAnon is the cancer. And so like the cancer's bad. And then you also need to address the fact that you're getting cancer. And it kind of feels like that here where it's like, yeah, there's some expected harm in terms of like, people just throw money at it and like the vast majority are just going to keep throwing money into it and not get anything out of it.
It's such a small number of people who get something out of it that it might as well be none.
Yeah, and it encourages gambling. I mean, and you can say like, yeah, taxes, but like obviously it was never a panacea for that in the first place.
Right.
So I think that there's definitely expected harm with the sort of caveat that like the reason that it's able to do this is because there's this underlying like all these underlying social economic changes that have happened in this country where there's very little to no safety net,
right,
where you can go bankrupt from a medical bill, where the definition of success has changed from like comfortable middle class to like having your name on a private jet. So I think that I'm going to go with like medium to high on this one. Medium to high expected harm.
I'll write down medium.
Okay. High to
med.
Meaty high. Okay, presence of ritual.
Oh, I think that there's not even a single presence of ritual in this. It's the least ritualistic thing I've ever imagined.
I mean, we have people. That
was sarcasm.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Thank you for explicitly explaining the sarcasm.
You're welcome. I know you needed it.
I do. I'm not super with it.
You're not good at picking things up.
Yeah. Okay. But yes, obviously very high, right? Because you have people doing their like birthday numbers or like, what was the story you told about like somebody like physically like rubbing on like lottery winners to like get some of their luck ions to rub off onto them?
When you started talking about buying lottery tickets for this episode, I was like, oh, we should find places that have had.
I know.
Specifically, I was like, oh, we got to go to the places that have had winners already.
Wait, was that for the story value or because you thought that it was gonna like
little column A, little column B?
Okay.
And if you noticed, most of the places that we went to buy lottery tickets from, probably 4 or 5 different places, had a sign out front that said like, oh, this is how much money has been won in the lottery at this place. Right. And like some of it was like, tens of thousands of dollars. Some of it was hundreds. The place we went to, I was actually shocked. We went to a place nearby, which we don't live in a super like crazy wealthy area of Los Angeles, middle class, upper middle class. That 7-Eleven did have the sign, and it was like, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
The place we went to in fucking Beverly Hills.
Which, by the way, we specifically went to that one in Beverly Hills to be like, I wonder, like, do people play the lottery in Beverly Hills? And the guy at the I asked the guy at the counter that, and he's like, yeah, we get a lot of people in here playing the lottery.
And their sign had hundreds of thousands of dollars of lottery payouts. Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's some fucking bullshit right there.
It was really interesting for me to see that. And then just also talking to the ritual of it all, like, yeah, my dad totally used to play birthday numbers. I think he had like a set of numbers that he would always play. He would buy his numbers, and then he would like do different try different things each time. And it was birthday numbers. And then it was also like when I was a very little kid, I was like, ooh, Mom, Dad, I can totally hear angels. I think I just...
Oh, shit. Were they lottery angels? Were they money angels?
I think I was just a small child with ADHD and didn't know what that meant.
Right,
and my brain was doing crazy things. And I was like, ooh, I'm listening to... I don't know, whatever it was. But, my parents humored me. And my dad even one time was like, you can hear angels? You want to ask him what he literally
for the numbers.
Asked me to ask them for lottery numbers. And I told him numbers to buy them the lottery.
They're also
he filled on the little Scantron.
Every single one of that quintessential Chinese American dessert, the fortune cookie.
This is true.
All the fortunes in the fortune. If you turn it over, they got your lucky numbers, and guess what people use those for?
I thought those were explicitly for lotto.
They might be. I don't know. Like they say lucky numbers, but it did have that feeling to me too. Okay, presence of ritual extremely high. Niche within society. Obviously, this is very low at this point because there's state lotteries everywhere. And the only way that these jackpots get up to such extreme numbers into the billions is because there is a extreme participation. So not niche at all, which means that it's going to be a religion if we decide anything. Okay. Anti-factuality. I think it's high for this one. I think because how many times did we say magical thinking in this episode? How many times? There's anti-factuality at the player level. There's there's magical thinking at
Is using
the state
fantastical
level.
language the same as...
It's not the language. It's the Indiana saying, well, it didn't work for New Jersey, Michigan, Kentucky, Florida, Alabama, but it might work for us. That's the anti-factuality.
Okay, but what about individuals playing? I don't know if individuals playing are necessarily like buying into anti-factual.
Absolutely they are. Not for the I definitely think there's not, like I was saying, that there's not like the tax on people who are bad at math. That's not true. I don't think. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that there's a rationality to I'm not going to get a chance any other way to improve my station. That's not anti-factual to me.
Okay.
But I do think that the post hoc God chose me.
Sure. Yeah, you're right.
Is some magical thinking to take this quintessential culture of chance thing and hack it into being a culture of control thing.
Yep, I think you're right.
So I think it's high. Life consumption.
This always ends up depending on the individual.
Yeah, I know.
It's you could just,
There's no lottery compound, but some people do the people that play will spend a lot of money every week.
Again, my dad played every week, but never put our family in debt for it and didn't, spend an inordinate amount of time going and buying scratchers and standing there and doing it. But it was a daily, weekly habit.
I think there's potential here. There's potential.
Low to high.
Yeah. Dogmatic beliefs. We're right, you're wrong.
I don't sense that.
I don't have a sense of that either. I don't have a sense of people that play lottery. Especially, actually, again, keep going back to that guy's quote. That guy was very self-aware that what he was doing was, the guy that said, this is a dumb hope.
Right.
But I'm doing it anyway. That to me is the opposite of dogma. Dogma is this is correct, and if you think that playing the lottery is stupid, then you're wrong. He's no, I know it's stupid. It's just less stupid.
Right.
So I think that dogmatic beliefs is very low here. Chain of victims. Chain of recruits, are we calling it now?
We are calling it chain of recruits.
Okay.
I don't get a chain here.
Yeah, do you feel like you want to play the lottery because your dad did?
No.
I don't feel like my parents didn't really play the lottery.
And there's not the oh, I need to get more people into this so that this thing sustains.
Yeah,
Whereas,
that's
like,
true.
That's kind of, that's part of the motivation for Chain of Recruits. Like, obviously that's in MLMs, but that's also in, like, you know, more, we were just having this conversation in the Discord, not to keep throwing it back to the Discord, but we were just having this conversation about how there can be in more, especially in more religious type cults or cult-like groups, there's encouragement to have children in the group.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a very clear, like, chain that is in order to sustain the group.
Right.
I don't get that with the lottery.
Right. Although the advertising, I guess it's not really chain, but I do want to call out how Dr. Cohen talked about the importance of, there is an importance of getting a lot of people involved, because nobody cares about like $1,000 jackpot. So the more people that are involved, the bigger the jackpot, the more people want to get involved. I don't think that's a chain necessarily,
No.
but there is a feedback effect going on there.
It's different than a chain, though.
Yeah, I'm going to say this one's relatively low because I don't see the recruiting element.
Okay.
All right, and finally, safe or unsafe exit. If you stop playing if you're a part of the lottery community, you play the lottery a lot, you go down to your local 7-Eleven every Thursday, which is something people do. There's like communities that all go to the same place. And then you stop. I read his whole book, did not get the impression that was like a bad thing to do.
That feels pretty safe to me.
Yeah, it feels like there's safe exit.
Yeah.
So what do we got? What does the ticker say? The tape.
Charismatic leader, no. Harm, medium. Ritual, high as hell. Niche,
jackpot on ritual.
Niche low, anti-factuality high. Life consumption low to high, dealer's choice. Dogmatic, no. Chain of recruits, no. Exit is safe.
This is feeling like I think based on the criteria, is feeling like a no to me.
So the ritual is high, the anti-factuality is high, the harm is medium, the life consumption is low to high. Everything else is a no.
There's no charismatic leader. There's everything else is no. So
I think it might be I don't even think it's a religion. I think it's just a weird.
It's just weird.
I think if there was a charismatic leader, and I think if maybe there was like either more dogma or more chain or more unsafe exit, then it would potentially fall into the religion. But I think that the lottery is just weird.
Yeah, and now that we're sort of like through the criteria, it's kind of what made me think about it as a topic for the show in the first place, is kind of what we're circling back to, which is like it has a lot of underlying trends and forces and cultural elements to the lottery that also apply to cult-like groups.
Right.
I just don't think it quite gets there in terms of being a tangible, coherent group of people that I can call a cult. But a lot of that same like prosperity gospel, culture of chance versus culture of control, economic conditions, anti-faction, a lot of those things that generate cults also seem to generate interest and participation in the state lottery system.
Just weird. So
I'm interested in what all you guys think as listeners. Kayla and I are both interested in your thoughts. And now we have a great place to come just like casually chat about that. Come join our Discord. So go check out our socials. There'll be a Discord invite there to our server. And then, I'd love to have a conversation with you guys about what you think about this episode or the ideas that we talked about here. If you read the book, I'd love to know. Go check out our Discord and let's have a chat. Come in, say hello.
Being able to record our episode while also simultaneously being in a chat room has been extraordinarily soothing for my ADHD. And so if you are somebody who also falls on the ADHD neurodivergent spectrum, come check it out, because this was a great way to kind of be able to focus.
Yeah, and actually I'll say that it was, since I had already interviewed the guy, or obviously had heard the interview, listening to it again while having people to chat with about it also helped me.
Go play the lottery this week. Go play the lottery
if you want to.
If you want, as just a.
How about this? Don't feel guilty if you do play the lottery.
And maybe try it if you've never done it before, just to have the experience. I think it's a good experience to have just once, just to see.
I think I can get behind that.
I didn't know you were so anti-lottery after this.
No, I just don't want to like give people gambling problems from our podcast. It's
the only way to get out of the system, Chris. Truman Show.
All right. Sounds like we need to have a different chat. Maybe that'll be the bonus episode, is the lottery something that we should encourage or not encourage people to do?
There you go.
This is Chris.
This is Kayla.
And this has been
Cult or Just Weird.
Cult or Jackpot.